most of us are interested in Bible prophecy. I think that a lot of people were brought into God's church because of a keen interest in Bible prophecy. So in order to understand Bible prophecy, we kind of need to understand where things are headed and where we are today. And one thing that we have to keep in mind when understanding Bible prophecy is that our world has changed. It has changed. And it has changed very recently, within the past 5 years, maybe at best. The world has changed drastically. And we are not looking at things the same way as we looked at them in most of the rest of the early 2000s, the 90s, or even the 80s. The world is a very different place. And what my presentation today is going to explain is just how different the world is. In fact, the world is so different that many of you are not going to recognize it, but it would have been much more recognizable to a certain Mr. Herbert W. Armstrong when he began preaching. And that's the reason why a lot of his prophecies, a lot of people dispensed with because they thought the world had changed then and was going into a different direction. But here's the thing, the world has changed back into a way that he would have recognized in his time. So let's go ahead with our first slide, and we're going to talk about multipolarity. Multipolarity simply means that instead of having a one world government or a one world dominated by a particular power, in this case the United States. So since the fall of the Soviet Union at the end of the 80s, we had what we called a unilateral United States ruled system, sometimes called the New World Order, especially by people like President Bush. The first President Bush talked about the New World Order quite a bit. And what that referred to was that America was now the dominant nation in the world and could act pretty much as it wished in influencing the rest of the world. Now, what has led to multipolarity? Multipolarity simply refers to the fact that America is no longer the undisputed dominant country in the world. There has been a case now to where other countries have started to challenge the unipolarity of the United States of America. Other countries such as Russia, China, places in Africa, South America, places that we would have never thought of in the past, Southeast Asia, places that we would have never thought in the past would have been able to challenge the undisputed power of the United States are now in a place where they are through the vehicle known as BRICS Plus. BRICS Plus simply stands for Brazil, Russia, India, China, South Africa, plus the other nations that have recently joined in the past couple of years. Now, what are some of the factors that have led to America losing its place as the undisputed power in the world? Number one is American decline. America has gone through a period of decline, morally and economically, spiritually, any different way that you can possibly think of. America has begun to decline in the world so that we're no longer able to dominate the rest of the world in a way that we used to. Another factor leading to multipolarity is disillusionment with globalism. How many people in this room love globalism? Awfully quiet. I would say that none of you are fans of globalism. Globalism meant that the world became one and that borders no longer meant anything, that people could come and go, and all we were looking at was economic opportunity zones throughout the world. Okay? Globalism means obliteration of your national distinctives, the things that make you specifically American, the things that might make you specifically Chinese, the things that might make you specifically Argentinian. All those things under globalism, which is what we were living under for the past 20 to 30 years, have been fought back against. People did not like globalism. It didn't go over well. So people are fighting back against globalism, and this will lead to multipolarity. Another thing that goes along with globalism is the rise of nationalism and populism. So nationalism simply means that you identify with your nation above any other nation. Everybody here glad to be an American? I'm glad to be an American. That's a form of nationalism. Instead of being a citizen of the world, you identify yourself as being a citizen of a nation. Now, what is populism? Populism means that we have rejected the elite's goals for us. We have rejected what the wealthiest people, the most powerful people, their plans, which were globalism, because it would make them much more wealthy. But the populace, the people who are not the main decision makers in the nation, have rejected globalism, have rejected the elites. So you see a rise of populism. Is there a figure in this country today who embodies this populism that we're talking about? Does anybody care to name who that might be? You know exactly who he is. The President of these United States, Donald Trump, is the embodiment of populism because he appeals to the common man. Populism. COVID-19, something that we don't like to talk about anymore, but affected us in very dramatic ways. COVID-19 influenced this rise of populism, influenced this disillusionment with globalism, and also helped in this American decline. COVID-19 also ensured that there was a supply chain breakdown. Anybody have any trouble getting their meds and stuff during COVID-19 or any time recently? I've known several people whose meds were shipped from China, and during this period of COVID-19 and the aftermath had a hard time getting their meds. There were other things that were involved in that too. There were shortages on grocery store shelves. A lot of things that didn't affect maybe this region as hardly as it did other regions within our country, but there was a supply chain breakdown because of COVID-19. People were stopping work. They were staying home. They were afraid to interact with other people. A lot of people took voluntary time off. The masking, all these other things. This led to the breakdown of unipolarity, the breakdown of the globalist system, and led to the rise of the multipolar world system. Because instead of sourcing all of your goods from a foreign nation, people wanted to start sourcing their goods more locally so that they could avoid that supply chain breakdown. Localism. We also see technological decentralization. That means that instead of manufacturing, instead of having one hub for all the technology around the world, such as Silicon Valley or down here at the Triad in the eastern part of North Carolina, instead of that being sort of a world place for tech and for the tech industry, this is spreading across the globe. You see it popping up in China. They have their own line of cell phones now, Huawei, which has also been involved in different AI and other technological pursuits. So you see a center of tech in China. You see centers of tech in Russia. You see centers of tech in other places around the world. So America no longer has the monopoly on tech. Another thing is the rise of regional powers. Anybody thought it strange when our president was interested in getting Greenland? Anybody think that kind of came out of nowhere? Well, it really didn't, because it's the rise of regional powers, the rise of localization. Anybody ever heard of the Monroe Doctrine? Monroe Doctrine says that the United States is going to take care of this hemisphere and you Europeans stay out and go take care of your own business. Well, this is a very old doctrine dating back from the 19th century, the early 19th century. President James Monroe, it's named after. But this doctrine has come back into effect. America is starting to claim her dominance over this hemisphere, over North and South and Central America. And part of that is getting Greenland, which so happens to be closer to the United States of America and to Canada than it does to Denmark. Another thing Trump was interested in was the Panama Canal. Anybody thought that was kind of strange how he went after the Panama Canal? It's really not, because it controls a lot of the traffic that goes across this world, a lot of the trade traffic. And we had China and other nations interested in controlling the Panama Canal, but because we're looking more locally now, we're looking within our own backyard, so to speak, we were interested in getting the Panama Canal, we're interested in getting Greenland, we're interested in beefing up our defenses, our strength in our region. That also explains why Russia's invading Ukraine. They consider Ukraine to be a part of their backyard, part of their region. Whether it's right or wrong, that's what they consider the Ukraine to be. And you can see other countries in other ways, such as China and Taiwan. Did you know that there were two Chinas? You have a Republic of China and you have the Democratic Republic of China. The mainland China is the Democratic Republic of China, and Taiwan is the Republic of China. Now, there's a long history going back to that, but there's two nations that both claim to be the proper Chinese government. Well, China now sees Taiwan as being part of their sphere of influence, part of their local sphere of influence, so they're interested in taking Taiwan and making that part of their sphere of influence. So you see more regionalism beginning to happen across the world. Alternative centers of influence. We talked about that before. Instead of having American culture begin to dominate the rest of the world, you know, when I was in school, it used to be said that two nations with a McDonald's would never go to war with each other. Anybody ever hear that before? Because American influence would have extended to both of those nations, their capitalism, their different modes of being, their trade, all those things. But now that's beginning to be different, because you're starting to have multinational brands that are starting to compete within their own nations against American brands. An American brand being McDonald's. You go to Russia, all the McDonald's are now gone. They're out of the country. Now Russia's setting up their own brands of fast food restaurants. And they may come to the point where they start to compete globally with McDonald's. So essentially, this is what has led to the multipolar world that we live in now, the more regionalized world that we live in now. This man, Alexander Dugin, is the father of modern multipolarity. Now, he is a Russian political philosopher, although his philosophy extends over many different regions. His main contribution to the way we look at the world is his theory of multipolarity, his theory of regionalism. And he calls this the fourth political theory. He calls this multipolarism the fourth political theory. So he says that there are three main political theories that are in play in the world in our modern time. One being liberalism, which is what we would call Americanism. It's capitalism, individualism, that type of thing. The second would be called communism. Everybody understands Karl Marx's communism. It's all about equality and collectivism and that sort of thing. The third being fascism. Everybody understands what fascism is. But he says that none of the three are correct. He says that indeed we need to come up with a fourth political theory, and he calls that multipolarity. And what multipolarity does is it takes things from each of the particular doctrines of liberalism, communism, and fascism without accepting either of them in whole. He takes elements, he cherry picks elements from each, puts it together in a new philosophy that is not any of the philosophies that they came from. He's been influenced particularly by the philosopher Martin Heidegger's German word, this concept of Dasein in German, which simply means beingness or way of being. Okay? What this way of being means is that every different people, every different civilization around this world have a different way of being. Does everybody understand that? They all have a different way of being. If I were to ask you, what is American? I think you could come up with some ideas of what makes an American an American. We love our freedom. We love trade. We love to go hunting and fishing. We love to be able to just experience that freedom. That's probably the biggest guidepost of being an American is freedom. But then you can go down and you can talk about other things, our histories, and you can talk about our military has its own different type of presentation. The way that we manufacture, the way that we build things has its own presentation. Our entertainments, such as football, baseball. You know, our football is very different from the football around the world, although they call that football too. Around the world, football is soccer. But our football is American football, so that's distinctively American. You can also say that we have things that are as American as apple pie. So that's our American Dasein. That's our American way of being. So if you think about other people, you can think about the Chinese. They have their own way of being. You can think about the Russians. They have their own way of being. You can think about Africans. They can have their own way of being. People in South America have their way of being. Okay? They all have things that make them distinctive. They have things that make them distinctive and make them a distinct culture. That's the meaning of Dasein. Dasein is that everybody has their own way of being. And you can see how this influences multipolarity. So if everybody has their own way of being, everybody has their own expression of who they are as a people, then it would make sense that we would have the freedom to do that without one particular nation or country or civilization trying to tell everybody else how to be. For example, it was very popular in the 90s and early 2000s to say, making the world safe for democracy. That was a neoconservative platitude. It was part of the reason why we decided that we needed to invade different countries in order to make sure that they had democracy. Well, maybe those countries, maybe those people had no reference for democracy. Maybe they didn't understand democracy. Maybe they had a different way of being. So the idea is that everybody has a different way of being. We have our president, we have our two houses of Congress, we have our Supreme Court, we have that way of being, that way of government, but maybe another people would prefer to have a king or a queen, or maybe have a parliament, or maybe have something a little bit different. So it's allowing for there to be multiple different types of government and way of being in the world. That's what multipolarity means. And he's also inspired by Julius Evola's traditionalist school. So this man, Alexander Dugin, is fundamentally a very anti-liberal man. He is a very conservative man. The traditionalist school was a very conservative school that flourished around the first half of the 20th century that said that there is a truth by which different people are able to acquire that truth. And we'll talk a little bit about that in just a second. So does anybody have any questions up to this point? All right, we'll continue on. Some of key points of Dugin's philosophy. Dugin is anti-democratic, okay? Anti-progressive. He does not believe that the populace, that their place, so to speak, is to be able to vote or influence what the elite do. He's anti-progressive, which means he does not believe in the idea of progress. He does not believe that, matter of fact, he goes against this globalist idea that a man can become a woman, that a woman can become a man. That's the type of anti-progressivism that I'm talking about. He personally is anti-Western, although he enjoys Western culture. He's read a lot of our different philosophers, for one, Heidegger. But he believes that Russia, his country, has its own civilization, its own way of being, its own design that is fundamentally different from Western culture. And I think that we could agree from our perspective that American culture is very different from Russian culture. So that's fair enough. He's pro-aristocratic, pro-religious. Those two go hand in hand. What that means is that he would like to see an empire reestablished in Russia, supported by and co-equal with the Russian Orthodox Church. He believes that there is no separation between church and state, which is something that we tend to believe in the West. He believes that they go together and they're integral. So he believes in the reestablishment of the czars of Russia, the czars of Russia, and the aristocrats of Russia. He would like to see a reestablishment of the aristocratic system in Russia. Very pro-Russian Orthodox Church, very pro-Russian itself, which is no surprise, and he's pro-regional. Once again, multipolarity. Different regional powers throughout the globe instead of one that controls all of them. So here's a summary of multipolarity. We have seen that the U.S., we're at an end of the age of U.S. being unilaterally powerful over everybody. Okay, there's no more one world system run by the United States of America. It's now going to be regional powers across the globe, ruling their own areas, ruling their own backyards. We're also going to see a decline of world liberalism. So I don't know if you have noticed, But we're in a time, even in this country, wherein conservatism is starting to be pushed by our media, such as Christianity, traditional Christianity, such as all the things that our president, Mr. Trump, has done so far in his tenure in the office. He's pretty much reversed all the liberal policies of the past. I mean, not just Biden, but going back into the distant past of this country. He's reversing a lot of those liberal policies, and he's going to continue to do so. Because when you're in a conflict, which is what inevitably happens in a multipolar world, everybody here knows about World War I, World War II, knows about all these regional conflicts and world conflicts of the past. You cannot run a country, a civilization on liberalism when a man doesn't realize that they're a man and a woman doesn't realize they're a woman, and they think they can just do whatever they want to and not ever have to strike a lick to work hard or anything like that. You can't run a country that's going to be inevitably drawn into conflicts. Notice also that we've restored the military in this country too. We've made it stronger. They've kicked out all the people that were cross-dressing and all that other stuff because we're moving into a multipolar world, and liberalism does not cut it. I think a lot of you were alive during the time of the Cold War, and you remember the country was a lot more conservative during the time of the Cold War than it is today. Does that tend to be correct? Especially during the height of the Cold War in maybe the 50s and 60s. So we're moving away from world liberalism. We're moving away from multiculturalism. We're moving away from globalism in general. We're moving more towards multipolarity. So you're going to see more conservatism arise within this country. You're also going to see a return of regional design, regional being. So we're talking about being more American, being proud of being American. You'll see people talk about being proud of being whatever nation they're from. Europe's a little bit behind the curve right now. The EU's a little bit behind the curve, but they're going to catch up, and you're going to see a lot more regional pride even in Europe. Talking about the Great Britain, the British Isles, we're talking about Germany, we're talking about Italy. You're going to see a lot more regional pride pop up across the world, and you're seeing it now in America today. If you're paying attention to what's being presented to us by different departments of our state, you're seeing much more traditionally focused things being presented to us. That's the return of our regional design. You're going to see more American flags. You're going to hear more of the old standards that we used to sing, God Bless America, all those different things as multipolarity takes control. You're also going to see an increase in geopolitical complexity. That means that it's not going to be so simple in the world anymore. You're going to see shifting alliances. You're going to see people power playing for different regions. You're going to see people trying to interfere in other regions and then maybe getting into conflicts or wars there. It's going to be a much more complex world that we are moving into instead of a much more simple world under the one worldism that we had been under. You're also going to see a lot more competition. You notice how Mr. Trump's bringing all the manufacturing, or he's attempting to bring manufacturing and all these other things back into our country. It's because we're in competition now with these other countries, and we can't afford to have our manufacturing done by these other countries. So we're going to bring it back. It'd probably be different than the way it left, but we are bringing manufacturing. We're bringing all the different industries that have left this country. We're bringing them back into the country. And so you're going to see much more economic competition between these various regions, this multipolarity. And you're also going to see diverging tech spheres and artificial intelligence. What that means is that we're going to develop our own tech. Likely you're going to see China developing their own tech, which they have been quite a bit. The Russians developing their own tech, Europe developing their tech, Africa, South America, all across this world, you're going to see different tech, and it's going to diverge. That means that it's going to be different from each other. You're likely to see a certain type of tech in America, and you may see a different type of tech in Europe. It's going to be different. It's not all going to be streamlined and the same. Does anybody have any questions about any of that to this point? About multipolarity, about the trends that we're looking at, because this all ties into Bible prophecy. Everything that I've been talking to you so far ties into Bible prophecy. And the reason it ties into Bible prophecy is because we can look at things that are prophesied to happen in our future, multipolarity in the Bible. Daniel 11 talks about a king of the north, talks about a king of the south, and also refers to various Middle Eastern and North African regions. You can't have a king without a nation. So we got two nations right there, a king of the north and a king of the south, and we tend to understand that the king of the north is probably going to come out of the EU, and we know that the king of the south is probably going to come out of an Arab nation. So there you already see multipolarity. You see Europe, and you see an Arab nation, or a Middle Eastern nation is a better term for that, fighting with each other over Jerusalem, which will be its own nation at that point as well. Zechariah 12:9 also talks about this time, says nations to come against Jerusalem, nations. So we're not talking about a one world system. We're not talking about a one world government. We're talking about nations. We're talking about different peoples that are going to come against a place called Jerusalem. And also, Revelation 16:12, to tie it all together, we also see kings of the east. So we have multiple kings in the east that are going to come against the king of the north once he's in Jerusalem. Armies of the east, kings of the east. Can't have kings without nations, and they're plural. It's not a king of the east, it's kings of the east. So you're likely to see Russia, China, India, and other nations in that eastern part of the world coming against the king of the north once he's come into Jerusalem. So that's a sure sign that the world that prophecy is going to take place in, a sure sign that it's going to be multipolar and it's not going to be a one world system. So we see that multipolarity in Bible prophecy. That's multipolarity. Now let's talk about the Antichrist. Let's talk about the Antichrist. And to do that, we're going to talk about artificial intelligence and something called Palantir. Has anybody here heard of Palantir before? Well, we'll talk about that. Artificial intelligence and Palantir. AI has changed tech. AI has given us more access to information. I've been using ChatGPT and Grok and other things like that. I've been playing with it. I've been getting it to come up with little pictures for our videos when we put them on YouTube. If you've ever wondered where the little pictures come from that I put on the YouTube videos, those come from Grok. Those come from artificial intelligence. I type a little command into the computer and it draws up an image for me. So you got more access to information. You can ask Grok, you can ask ChatGPT, just ask them a question, come up with an answer. It's not always the best answer, but it will come up with an answer. And how that works is it scours the internet for all the sources on the internet and brings it together and puts it together and formulates an answer for you. But in other contexts, and this is where we'll get to Palantir, other contexts, it'll collect information from other places. So you have also better healthcare diagnostics. So instead of relying on a man, a doctor, to formulate your diagnosis in his head, he can go to a specialized piece of AI and he can gather all the information across whatever systems are connected to that AI and come up with a diagnosis for you. Better business efficiency, same thing. Instead of having to work through things, you can go to AI and it can present you with a solution to whatever problems that you may be having in your business. Self-driving cars and robotics. I know a lady here whose husband has a self-driving car. There's a self-driving car that pulls up into our parking lot every once in a while. Matter of fact, when Felicia and I took our vacation, we rented a car that partially self-drove. Every time I got close to the line or close to the center line, it would beep, 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 and the wheel would turn back straight. And if I was going too fast, it would warn me of that and different things like that. It probably could have been set on full self-drive, but I just don't trust it. AI has changed education and research. So instead of one person going to a library or newspapers or anything like that to search different books, sources, newspapers, whatever they're looking for, instead of doing that, you can use AI to correlate all that together for you into one place. Makes it a lot easier. And also the defense industry and policing have been revolutionized. The defense industry and policing. So same idea. instead of a detective, a gumshoe or whatever you want to call him, going around and looking at things with his magnifying glass and asking questions and doing all the Columbo stuff, you have a computer that can collect all the information, all the clues, all the crime scene evidence, bring it together and put it together for you in a streamlined way. So it takes a lot of the guesswork, takes a lot of the human error out of policing. Same thing with the defense industry. Weapons. You can feed all your intel, your intelligence into this system, and it will tell you likely that that's a power plant or maybe that's a barn or whatever, so that you know what to target and how to target it. That's how AI has helped the defense industry. Let's go a little bit further into the defense industry. Another thing AI has done, and this has been seen in the battlefields in Ukraine, is it has allowed for autonomous weapons and drones. That means self-propelled weapons and drones. A lot of the drones that are flying are programmed with AI so that it can make its own decisions rather than have somebody with a controller controlling it and a screen. It makes its own decisions and knows where to bomb and what to do. And that technology is only going to increase over time. Surveillance and reconnaissance. Same thing. They can go in and they can take a look at what's out there, correlate it together, and bring the intel back. And then you can feed that into another, all that together, and present you with a solution. Cybersecurity and cyber warfare, same thing. When people try to break into the bank, go through a back door, they try to hack in or whatever else, you can have AI that shuts it down immediately, recognizes it as a threat before a human can recognize it, and shut it down immediately. Logistics and maintenance, getting supplies onto the field where they need to go, AI has revolutionized that. So instead of having to get a bunch of paperwork and logs and stuff like that, and having somebody come and say, hey, I need 1,000 gallons of fuel or 1,000 gallons of diesel, the computer will already be aware of usage, will be aware of what's being used, and can automatically send up to the logistics officer and say, hey, we need 1,000 gallons without somebody ever having to radio it in. Takes all the guesswork out. Policing. Let's talk about policing in AI. Has anybody seen a movie called Minority Report? Okay. This movie came out in 2002. So over 20 years ago, we had a movie about predictive policing. We'll come to that. So with AI, facial and biometric recognition, have you been in a store? I know Lowe's employed this for a time. I don't know if they still do or not, but they had cameras where you'd go in and the camera would get a snapshot of your face. Anybody have seen that before? Get a snapshot of your face as you go by somewhere. Well, that's part of the policing. They correlate that together, and they're able to match you up based on your facial biometrics, based on your fingerprints, based on a lot of different things, so that if you commit a crime or break a law, it makes it a lot easier for them to find you. Same thing, automated surveillance systems. So if you're acting strangely, the AI that controls the cameras or whatever else can zoom in on you and watch you a little bit more closely than it watches somebody else. Forensics and investigations, same thing. Brings all the clues together and prints out a printout or shows up a report on the screen that tells who's most likely have done the crime that has been done. They're also going to be using robotics and drones in policing. So instead of a squad car, it's likely to have a self-propelled car or maybe a drone to go out there and enforce the law that makes its own decisions without anybody handling it. The next thing, the thing that worries a lot of people, is the predictive policing. That was what Minority Report was about. That particular movie was about predictive policing. So they'd go around and they'd arrest people before they'd ever committed a crime because it could predict, the AI in that could predict who was going to commit a crime, when and where and how. Now, a lot of people, that terrifies a lot of people, but I'm going to tell you this now, our AI is not up to that point yet, but it's being talked about. So, that's maybe one of the drawbacks, one of the things that we don't necessarily want. So what's the entity that does the policing and the defense industry? It's something called Palantir Gotham. Palantir Gotham. Now, you'll be seeing this a lot more as time goes on because Palantir is one of the major, well, I'll pull that back. We'll go into that in a minute. Let's talk about what Palantir Gotham does. It is a software that works to bring together data. So it brings together data from all over the place. So anywhere where there's a computer bank that has data in it, it can search that if it's connected to the system. It can also bring together entity resolution and modeling. So instead of taking a guess that John Doe number 5 might be the same as John Doe number 1, it can run the facial biometrics. It can run a bunch of different software to make sure that those two people are actually the same person. So it integrates these things together. Link analysis and relationship mapping. So John Doe number 5 is a drug dealer. Hey, John Doe number 5 is a drug dealer. Where does he frequent? Where does he get his drugs from? Who buys his drugs? This can map those relationships and get to the point to where they find out where the drugs are coming in, who they're coming in from, target that person, and cut the thing off at the beginning. Anybody wonder about why we're in South America, why we're bombing ships that are coming out of particular countries out of there? It's because this has been used to map the relationships of where the drugs are coming into this country. Palantir Gotham. Operational decision support. So instead of you making a unilateral decision to do something regarding police or regarding military, you can consult this and make sure that that's a good plan before you do it, before you carry out your operation. And it's used in the real world. It's not just theoretical. Palantir is the name of the parent company. Gotham is the name of the software that specifically goes to the police and the military. There are other Palantirs for business applications and things like that, but for our purposes today, this is what Palantir Gotham does. This is AI software that integrates all the data together, brings it together, and presents you a model. You have these words. These words indicate what it does, and then I've got a short description beside it. It ingests. That means it connects to messy, siloed data sets. So different people have different pieces of data, or the data's spread throughout. It can bring it all together. Resolves. So it links and identifies related entities. So like we were talking about, if some John Doe number 5 is getting his drugs from South America, it can identify that. It can bring all this information together and identify where he's getting his stuff from. Visualizes. So it will generate a graph, a data set, a timeline, and all these different things to show you what's going on. Investigate. So it will, on its own, go ahead and analyze all the information that it has access to. Also secures, provides fine-grained access control and logging. So it has a very tight security structure to it. Act. So it supports mission planning, threat response, and decision making. So you can use this software and say, I want to go after John Doe number 5 because he's getting these drugs. It can give you a way to go after him that would be safest for the law enforcement officers. So say he goes to sleep at 5 a.m. every night and he's a deep sleeper and he doesn't wake up till 2 in the afternoon. Well, they know that they can go in and go after him at some time between those 2 points in order to make it safer for everybody involved. It uses AI software to make its decisions. So in one sentence, if you take nothing else away about Palantir Gotham turns oceans of raw data into actionable intelligence for analysts, operatives, and decision makers. So it takes all the raw data, brings it together for the person to be able to use. That's what Palantir Gotham does. And we're going somewhere with this. It connects to multipolarity, and it connects to some other things. It connects to the Antichrist. Anybody ever heard of Peter Thiel? Okay. Alexander Dugin is the philosopher of multipolarity. He's the philosopher of the world in which we see it now. Thought always precedes action. So if you have nothing but disdain for philosophers, for people who do heavy thinking, then you're in the wrong boat. Because the people that do the heavy thinking influence the way the world happens, the way it becomes down the road. Peter Thiel is the founder of Palantir. Peter Thiel is the co-founder of Palantir, along with a couple of other gentlemen. And he has a very interesting way of thinking about the world that we're going to see. So let's talk about the founding of Palantir by Peter Thiel. Palantir was co-founded in 2003 by Alex Karp, Joe Lonsdale, Stephen Cohen, Nathan Gettings, and Peter Thiel. Peter Thiel was instrumental in funding and conceptualizing Palantir. Peter Thiel contributed the seed fund of approximately $30 million through his venture capital firm, Founders Fund. And Palantir's mission is to bridge Silicon Valley technology with national security work. So all the tech that has been developed in Silicon Valley is now being brought into national security, policing, and other ventures because of the work of Palantir, which is the brainchild of specifically Peter Thiel, who we're talking about today. But Alex Karp's another interesting character, but I don't have time to get into him. But we will get into Peter Thiel. So what was Peter Thiel's vision for Palantir? You notice this black orb here on this side of the screen? That orb is a Palantir. The name comes from Lord of the Rings, J.R.R. Tolkien's book called Lord of the Rings. Now, in this book, you had several of these things scattered across his little world. And what they would be used for is you could touch it and you could see what was going on wherever their other Palantirs were. Okay? It was like a scrying stone. It's like a crystal ball. You touch it and you could see what was going on in the rest of the world. And one of the evil wizards in the story had one of these and was using it to see what was going on in the rest of the world as part of his control mechanism. That's why this AI is named after this, okay, as a seeing stone, a stone that you can see what's going on in all parts of the world. So Peter Thiel's vision for Palantir was to use big data analytics to support intelligence and law enforcement agencies. We've gone over that. But the goal is to build a platform that preserves civil liberties. That means our freedoms as Americans. He wants to preserve civil liberties while helping government agencies analyze complex data to prevent, not to stop, but listen, to prevent terrorism and crime. Predictive policing. That's the ultimate goal of Palantir. Now, you should see some contradictions in that sentence. See, he wants to preserve civil liberties, but at the same time, he wants to be able to prevent crime before it happens. See the contradiction?
That's the accumulation of data. You have to give up the data, give up your freedom.
Bingo. Let's talk a little bit about Peter Thiel. He is an interesting name. He was born on October the 11th of 1967, and he's from Germany. Does that raise any alarms?
Really?
He's from Germany. He moved to the U.S. as a child and was raised in California. He has his bachelor's from Stanford, has his Juris Doctorate from Stanford Law School, and in 1988 he founded PayPal. Has anybody ever used PayPal? Ever used PayPal to make a purchase online? He founded that. He also co-founded Palantir Technologies in 2003. Now, is this the first time a lot of you have heard about this? Probably ought to wonder why this is the first time you've heard about this. Co-founded Palantir Technologies in 2003, so it has been around for over 20 years, 22 years. And his net worth is estimated to be in the billions. But he's not only, let's look at some of his influences. Let's look at some of his philosophical influences before we get into a little bit more. The philosophy of Peter Thiel is rooted in something called the Dark Enlightenment. The Dark Enlightenment. Now, this is a influential, though not very well known, branch of philosophy and political science that has come into being in the past, I don't know, about 15 years. It's become popular, especially among some folks on the internet, but it is highly influential on people that run the world, the elites. His particular vision is a highly iconoclastic version of Christianity. So Peter Thiel nominally claims to be a Christian, but as we'll see, it's a very interesting form of Christianity. In his early years, he was a libertarian. So he was very much interested in preserving civil liberties. He was most libertarians are anti-government. They believe in maximizing capitalism as much as they can, free market capitalism, maximizing freedom and reducing government. But over time, he was come to be engrossed in this philosophy of the dark enlightenment and neo-reaction. Neo-reaction. Now, earlier we talked about a man named Alexander Dugin who is highly anti-liberal, who is very, very, very conservative to the point of wanting to reestablish the Tsar in Russia, to wanting to reestablish the aristocracy, to wanting to reestablish the union of church and state, the Orthodox Church and the Tsar in Russia. Well, neo-reaction wants to accomplish much of the same goals. Now, it's a big thing. It's a big philosophy, and there's a lot of different schools within it. But a lot of the people that are very popular, very trendy in our world today adhere to some version of this. Anybody ever hear of somebody named Elon Musk? Has a lot of crossover with this particular type of philosophy. And so what this is, and this particular book that I've got on the screen is called The Dark Enlightenment. It's written by a philosopher named Nick Land. If you're ever interested, you can get it on Amazon along with The Fourth Political Theory. No, actually, that one you can't get in America anymore. Mr. Dugin's work has been outlawed in this country since the beginning of the Ukraine war. This one you could still get. But the thought of neo-reaction is that we should have some kind of CEO king, okay? So we should have a king that's kind of like a CEO, sort of like maybe a President Trump that could run the whole country at his command. They also want to reestablish an aristocracy, but an aristocracy of tech geniuses. So they want to have tech geniuses. They want to have the enlightened people run the country. They also would like to see sort of like city-states, regional city-states, in a sense, kind of like ancient Italy was modeled, or not ancient, but medieval Italy was kind of modeled around. And so they would like to see a much more hierarchical society, a much more what they would call traditional society. So this neo-reaction is also influenced by the works of Julius Evola, who also influenced Alexander Dugin that we talked about earlier. Now, let's bring that back in. One of the biggest points that they have is that Western civilization is at a crossroads. Now notice that they don't say that world civilization is at a crossroads. They say that Western civilization is at a crossroads. So they're thinking already in a multipolar way. They're thinking about the West as an entity. That our civilization is at a crossroads, and there are a lot of factors that involve that, like the lack of religion, the lack of general religion, the lack of Christianity being a big one. Also the idea that transgenderism and all the other things that are plaguing our culture, that are plaguing Western culture today, globalism, all these things. They say that we're at a crossroads and we're either going to fall off the edge or we're going to make a bridge to be able to get across and get across better than we were. So there's probably things in this thought that revolt you, and there's probably things that you agree with, and that's part of the allure for a lot of people for this type of thought. But Peter Thiel's particularly interested in the last enemy being death. Now, if you've heard that before, that is scriptural. The last enemy to be defeated is death. But they have an interesting way of looking at this. They have an interesting way of looking at the last enemy being death. See, they're interested in life extension technologies. Matter of fact, Peter Thiel's heavily invested in something called the Methuselah Foundation. Everybody's familiar with Methuselah, correct? The man that lived to be almost 1,000 years old. Well, Peter Thiel is invested in technologies that will extend the life of human beings. Now, that could be through technology fusing.
That'd be using artificial intelligence to do that.
Bingo. One of the ways to do that's artificial intelligence, fusing with technology, different things like that. Peter Thiel and other people in this movement hate the idea of dying. Okay? Now, he does embrace a weird form of Christianity. And this is one of the reasons why it's kind of weird, because he does quote Scripture, but he takes it way out of context. Takes it way out of context and uses it to justify things such as life extension, giving yourself more power. Wouldn't it be wonderful if you could run 50 miles an hour? Things like that. It's called transhumanism. He's big into transhumanism. transhumanism. Okay? Peter Thiel and a lot of the other thinkers that are in this are big into transhumanism. One more thing about Peter Thiel. When our president selected J.D. Vance as his vice president, were you a little shocked when that happened? Like, who's this guy? I remember having that reaction, like, who's J.D. Vance? I'd heard of him before, but it was definitely not one of the ones I thought he was going to pick. Well, Peter Thiel was very influential in getting J.D. Vance, getting him started, getting him money, getting him going in his political life. And Peter Thiel, through Palantir, has been very influential in funding the Trump campaign and funding Trump as he is. Now, that doesn't mean that we jump off the edge and say, oh, Trump's terrible and J.D. Vance is terrible. It just means that Peter Thiel funded these particular people because they express something that he wants to see in the world. And in general, in a very general sense, having more Christianity in the country, having the country become more conservative, and looking more inward rather than controlling the rest of the world, to me, sounds good. I would support that. But there are other things that may come in, so we just have to watch and see what happens. So Peter Thiel also has a philosophy of the Antichrist. So Peter Thiel is interested in progressing technology. He's interested in progressing AI. He's interested in progressing tech, life extension, and all these other things. But he thinks that we should do it in a Christian manner. He thinks that if we're going to make this leap into technological progress, that we need to have a morality that undergirds that. Okay? You need to have a morality to undergird that. So he's talking about we should use Christianity to build up the people of this country in order to be able to embrace this future, this tech future that we're going into, this progressive future that we're going into. And so with that, he believes in technological progressivism. He rejects globalism and bureaucracy. He wants a more localized. He loves the West. He loves America. He wants us to be successful. And he does that in response to what he perceives as the decline of the West and demagoguery and the religion of progress. See, he believes that people who want to embrace this tech that we're going into without a moral foundation, without Christianity, he believes that's wrong. But at the same time, he believes that people who simply just react to technology because on the basis of technology, that's wrong too. His idea is that we need to move forward, but we need to do it in a moral way. So who is Peter Thiel's idea of an Antichrist? Peter Thiel's idea of the Antichrist, on which he's giving a series of lectures, by the way, in California. He's giving a series of lectures on his philosophy of the Antichrist that began earlier this month. I was planning on giving this presentation then until the Charlie Kirk assassination happened, so I had to change over real quick. But it began that week, the beginning of September, and is continuing on, I believe, through now. Series of lectures on his belief of the Antichrist. His belief of the Antichrist is there will be some guy to raise up who will say, we've had enough of technology and we're rejecting technology. He believes that he will use that type of populist energy and fervor to go against technology. That's his idea of the Antichrist. And he will become a large demagogue and will use that to control much of the rest of the world. So somebody will come to power denying Christianity, that's one part of it, and technology and progress, and become the demagogue that rules the world. Now that sounds more like what we understand to be the beast or the beast system, okay? But he's calling that the Antichrist. He's calling that the Antichrist. Because he believes that artificial intelligence, he believes in all the tech that we want, that it's coming. There's no stopping it. He believes that we should have a Christian morality undergirding our development of those technologies. So what does the Bible say about Antichrist? The Bible actually has quite a bit, and I'm just going to put a few verses up here. Matthew 24:24 says, "For there shall arise false Christs and false prophets, and they shall show great signs and wonders, insomuch that if it were possible, they shall deceive the very elect." 1 John 2:18 says, "Little children, it is the last time, and as you have heard that Antichrist shall come, even now there are many Antichrists, whereby we know it is the last time." And then 1 John chapter 4, verses 1 through 3, "Beloved, believe not every spirit, but try the spirits whether they are of God, because many false prophets are gone out into the world. Hereby know ye the Spirit of God. Every spirit that confesseth that Jesus Christ is come in the flesh is of God. And every spirit that confesseth not that Jesus Christ is come in the flesh is not of God. And this is that spirit of Antichrist, whereof ye have heard that it shall come, and even now already is in the world." I would tell you, just from what I understand about Peter Thiel's version of Christianity, I would say that he worships a false Christ. He doesn't seem to worship the same Christ that we worship, or have the same understanding that we have. And there's a paradox about the whole thing. Thiel is responsible for the very tools that may bring about his Antichrist, or may bring about an Antichrist, or bring about the beast power. Palantir, the ability to do predictive policing. Life extension programs such as the Methuselah Foundation, the fusing of man and tech. AI, which undergirds both of those. The defense firms that will be using this AI, that will be using Palantir. It's investments in surveillance in order to gain all the information together to be able to use to do predictive policing, or to be able to arrest people for those things, is going to require surveillance. That's how you get more data in order to feed into the AI so that it can come up with a more accurate model. Okay? Now, in conclusion, what do we bring away from this lecture? What do we bring away from this? We bring away that the world is becoming infinitely more complex. We are going to see a much more complex world than what most of us are used to. We're going to see multipolarity as envisioned by Alexander Dugin, and we're also going to see the tech and AI revolution spearheaded by Peter Thiel, Elon Musk, and others. So the world is going to be not so integrated anymore. So we're going to be seeing a lot more little wars and disagreements and things like that, just because the world is not going to be under the influence of one power. We're also going to see a tech and AI revolution. That's coming. There's no stopping that unless Christ comes back before it gets fully into gear. Because you have to develop these technologies, because if you do not, your enemies will, and they will use it against you. So trends to watch for. These are trends to watch for that connect us to prophecy as the Bible talks about. We're going to be moving away from globalism. We're going to be moving towards regionalism. Okay? Each region is going to be dominated by a particular power, a particular civilization that's going to dominate each region. Okay? We understand our Bible. There's going to be a king of the north. There's going to be a king of the south. There's going to be a civilization in the north, European Union. There's going to be a civilization in the south, probably the Muslim world. We're also going to see kings of the east, China, Russia, probably North Korea, India, and into Southeast Asia. You're going to see different centers of influence that come together. And we know that that happens in our Bible. We're going to see also a move away from Western-style liberalism. We see that already in our country. Although there are people who are part of the communist left in this country, socialists and all that other stuff, that are staging attacks, that's an attack of a dying movement. That movement is dying in this country. There will always be some who will connect themselves to it, but the majority of people in the West are moving away from socialism, moving away from communism, moving away from that type of liberalism. You're also going to see rapid advancements in tech and AI systems. We may be seeing an image of the beast. Now, these developments move us much closer to the world described in Bible prophecy concerning Christ's return. And as I started this at the beginning, the world that Mr. Herbert Armstrong was born into and lived through up until the start of the Soviet Union resembles much more the world that we're going into than the world that most of us grew up in. Most of us grew up, at least in the Cold War, where you had a duopoly, a two-world power in the world. You had America, and you had the Soviet Union. Those were the two ruling powers. Soviet Union fell in the 80s and into the early 90s. You had one world power, the United States of America. Now, Donald Trump is the first multipolar world president. Mr. Biden was kind of a throwback to the old unilateral system. He thought he could just tell everybody what to do in the world, and we still had the power to enforce it. It's just not the case anymore. We're now in a multipolar world, and it's going to be very interesting because it's going to resemble much more the world that we knew. Well, maybe not us specifically, but a lot of people who grew up in the early 20th century or the 19th century would have been much more familiar to them. Europe will eventually catch up. They'll rise up. We'll see the king of the north come out of them. The Arab world is going to get stronger. It's going to continue to get stronger. We'll see a king of the south come out of them. You'll also see Africa increase in strength. It's already being developed by Russia and China. A lot of people don't realize that, but millions of dollars have been poured into the development of Africa. And so they are becoming an economic power on their own. Southeast Asia, Malaysia, Indonesia, becoming economic powers. Japan, if they don't catch up, then they're going to be left behind. They may become a satellite nation of China, which is something that a lot of them in that country are worried about now. But South America is going to become powerful. Probably Brazil or Argentina will lead it. And the United States will be over probably Canada and Mexico. We will probably have the dominant position over those countries if we don't annex them outright. But we're moving away from globalism, and we're moving much more towards nationalism and conservatism because our leaders have decided that that is the way forward. And you may agree with it, you may disagree with it, you may agree with parts of it and disagree with parts of it. I think that's the natural course, is probably to think that a lot of it's good and some of it's not so good. But Satan is the king of this world. And a king understands that to rule a population, especially one as large as the world, it's better to have them separated and warring against each other than to have them united in some way. So it's all going according to God's plan after all, but Satan thinks that he's going to separate the world up and he's going to be able to engulf the countries that he doesn't want to be around anymore, probably including the United States, Israel, and others. But multipolarity in the history of the world, in case Christ doesn't come back for another 100 years or 200 years, multipolarity doesn't last long in terms of things. One nation or one civilization or a couple of civilizations always gain the upper hand. And once they gain the upper hand, then they will control the rest in that world. So it may go back to the way it was in 100 years. It may go back to that way. But if Christ is coming back, it's going to be a multipolar world. So it's going to be a world with dominant, split up civilizations. And a lot of the technology that would be used to bring about a lot of the things that are spoken of in prophecy, Palantir, AI, things like that, they're being developed actively now. One of the things that I might add is that AI, Palantir, Gotham may not be as good as they're making it out to be, because when the gentleman shot, or the man shot Charlie Kirk, it wasn't Palantir Gotham that found him, even though they had all the different cameras and all that stuff. His father turned him in because he confessed. So Palantir Gotham may not be that powerful just yet, but it's being developed right now. So that is multipolarity and the Antichrist. We're moving into a world that resembles a lot of what Bible prophecy tells us that the world is going to look like when Christ returns.